Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate the witnesses' testimony here on a very important topic. I wanted to go back to the issue Senator Inhofe raised on energy. And being from an energy-producing state like he is, I think we're just scratching the surface on finally realizing how important this instrument of U.S. power can be to bolster our allies and push back on the Russians, to be perfectly honest. Mr. Wilson, you and I worked in the Bush administration on an important energy project, the Southern Corridor Pipeline, or the BTC pipeline, so a lot of people know it by Baku, Tbilisi, Ceyhan. That it was is a dual oil and gas pipeline from the Caspian Sea out into the Mediterranean into southern Europe. Do you believe that when we worked on that, the Russians certainly weren't supportive of that initiative, were they?
Dramatically opposed.
Yeah, and that was U.S. diplomacy and leadership that drove that very important Southern Corridor strategy. You know, we passed, and I was a big supporter recently of the Iran and Russia sanctions bill. There are elements of that, though, that it's now becoming apparent that could possibly undermine the completion of that Southern Corridor pipeline, particularly on the gas side. Are you aware of that at all?
In the legislation? Or
yeah, in the legislation.
I don't know the details of that.
Well, we can get that to you. I would welcome the panel's opinion. There might be an opportunity to tweak some of the legislation in the House side or in the conference to make sure that we're not undermining actually one of the big geostrategic plays that we undertook against Russia, which was to help those countries to develop that Southern Corridor. Would you be supportive of that if we were somehow inadvertently undermining actually a very good energy strategy that we've been undertaking? By the way, the Clinton administration, then the Bush administration, and even the Obama administration were all supporters of the Southern Corridor pipeline.
I think we have yet to fully maximize our harnessing of America's energy strength. You cited the example of Baku, Tbilisi, Ceyhan, which was a huge strategic and commercial success. We have not had the win that we need still in finishing the Southern Corridor effort. And it's in part, I think as Senator Inhofe mentioned, adding LNG exports into the mix is useful. Yeah. But there are still real challenges in the pipeline structure, particularly when it comes to the Western Balkans, Serbia, Hungary in particular. And I think this is an area where, in the absence of a combined, concerted diplomatic effort that's based in the commerciality, it's really hard to get these done. And at the same time, we have undermined our own interest in efforts because Nord Stream 1, Nord Stream 2 have really helped negatively impact some of the economics that would be required to get this right.
Yeah. Let me turn to the issue of allies that I think most members of the committee here are focused on. Would you agree that one of the most important strategic advantages that we have as a country globally, but particularly in Europe, is that the United States is an ally-rich nation and our adversaries and potential adversaries like Russia are ally-poor?
I think this is sometimes something that we don't fully as a nation appreciate. The historically unique asset we have in a global network of alliances of countries that will stand with us, go into the fight with us, and that this is a huge force multiplying effect for our influence and our power in the world.
And isn't it also true that don't you believe that we should be looking to deepen those alliances and expand them, particularly when it's very clear that Russia's one of their top strategic goals, as was pointed out in testimony, is to undermine and split our alliances?
I think that's right. I mean, nations around the world understand that Russia's strong relationships are often based on coercion and intimidation. And that is not how we operate. So I think the value that these alliances represent for us means that we actually have to invest in them. They don't work without our leadership, and look for opportunities to actually be able to welcome others into those camps.
Let me just pose one final question to the entire panel on this issue of allies. You know, a number of us, myself included, had some concerns about when President Trump was a candidate talking about alliances that didn't seem to understand, you know, the importance, and a number of us had concerns about maybe the Trump administration wasn't focusing enough on our alliances. This is in addition to the Obama administration, Some of you might remember the Atlantic piece last year entitled The Obama Doctrine, and if you read it, it essentially was President Obama openly being dismissive of most of the leaders of our key allies. This certainly wasn't an ally-building exercise as well. What more can the Trump administration or the members of Congress be doing to enable us to deepen and expand our alliances, which clearly would help advance the national security interests of the United States?
Thank you for that question. I think it's incredibly important that we strengthen our alliances. Our alliances are our greatest foreign policy advantage, period, full stop. It's what other authoritarian states look at and say, I want that. Can I have that? There's no magnetism, as Damon said. You know, Russia's alliances are built off of coercion, so we need to protect them. And the way that we can do that, Damon also mentioned U.S. leadership, is incredibly important in NATO. NATO doesn't work without U.S. leadership. Deterrence doesn't work without U.S. leadership. And so, you know, attending meetings, holding back maybe when you would like to criticize aloud and keeping things inside a room, I think these all are our important signals, right? It's optics, but it's important when you're talking about alliance, because you're not just sending messages to friends, you're sending messages to adversaries about the U.S. commitment. As you know, credible deterrence is built off of two things, capability and intent. Putin has to believe that we not only have the power to defend our alliances, but that we have the will and intent to defend our alliances. The statements that I have seen so far, I think, undermine that deterrence.
If I could add, I think this administration has actually quite a strong national security team. The next step, though, would be for that national security team to devise a strong national security doctrine, which includes the NATO, the purpose and capabilities of the NATO alliance. And I think deeds are more important than words as well. In other words, this enhanced forward presence that we're now building in the Baltic states, in Poland, extremely important. Started late, unfortunately, but at least started under Obama. It's important that this administration, Trump administration, is reinforcing, continuing with that. But I think we need to look at other factors, look at our allies, particularly those most vulnerable along the eastern flank, and ask them, what is it that you need? Air defense, missile defense, territorial defense, we can help you in all this. So I think deed as well as word is essential.
I'll just add, I think it's absolutely right to keep the pressure on our allies to do more in terms of defense investment, as has been a consistent bipartisan policy, and certainly from this body. But I also think there's a difference in understanding that our alliances, our relationships are not just transactional with them. These are long-term relationships. In fact, we have permanent alliances. Understanding the value of consulting them on big decisions, and recognizing that a third of the forces, for example, in Afghanistan, were provided for our allies. They're in the fight with us. These are not transactional relationships alone. I also think the more that this body can help actually make the case to your constituents as well about how alliances are force multipliers for our interests and our values, and not just a taxpayer burden, I think it's an important message to take to the American people as well.
Thank you. Very helpful. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.